According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, the average child in America spends about 7 hours a day in front of electronic media. Further studies in their research indicated that the average child spends around 98% of their time indoors. And when we look at these startling statistics and we start to compare them with things that's been produced and sent out by the Center for Disease Control and the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Journal of American Medical Association, we see other alarming statistics, like a 32% obesity rate among our children in the United States. Or even more alarming, maybe the 70% increase in the last decade in vitamin D deficiency among our youth, which can be directly related to the amount of time they're spending in the sunlight. And most alarming to me as a parent is the fact that 12-year-olds are now showing up for pediatric wellness visits with several risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So much so that the Center for Disease Control suggested that maybe for the first time in our human history that today's children growing up, my children, may not live as long as their parents. These are alarming statistics, but the underlying theme to it is that the time children spend outside, the amount of time they're outdoors, is directly related to their health, to their well-being, and to their learning. This is a serious issue, and I see it play out every day in my life. I'm the father of 3 children, ages 4 to 11. I've been a school teacher in my past and worked as a naturalist and now as a director of a nature center. And I see children on a daily basis, whether it's my own or kids in the neighborhood or kids that visit the nature center I work at the Outdoor Discovery Center. I see children who have a fear for the outdoors, who have a fear for lions, tigers, and bears, and anacondas being in the woods here in Holland, Michigan, because the world they grew up in is this world that's fed to them through the electronic media. Video games, television, the internet, that's what influences our children more than anything these days. And we need to begin to understand the implications of the way our children are growing up so that we can start to implement change. Because even the CDC is calling these developmental issues going on that I just spoke about as epidemic or near epidemic in nature. See, I think we need to talk about 3 specific things that we need to change to begin helping our children grow up to be happier, healthier, and smarter. We need to look at how they roam and their ability to roam in a community. We need to look at the amount of unstructured playtime that our children are allowed to have. And we need to detach our children from this electronic umbilica that they are attached to. When we start thinking about things like the electronic umbilica and where your kids roam and unstructured play, you may be sitting out there as I talk and say, well, it doesn't affect me or it doesn't affect our children. And that may be the case, but statistics are showing us on a global level, not just here in the United States, but around the world, children's time outdoors has been diminished significantly, and it's impacting their lives. When we look at this idea of roaming and children roaming in a community, some statistics that have been published in the last few years, one indicates that 25% decrease in the number of children who walk or ride their bike to school. Think about, did you walk or ride your bike to school? A majority of children today do not. They're bused, they're scheduled, and they're taken in an orderly fashion. They don't get to wander, they don't have that opportunity to walk or ride their bike. We also see other statistics that go along with this, like a 40% reduction in bicycle sales over the last 15 years nationwide. These statistics can be paired with other statistics that, again, back up this idea that children simply do not get out and move around in their community anymore. We actually are growing up a generation of children that are not connected to place. This graphic I'm going to share with you here really represents this well. It was produced by the Daily Mail in the United Kingdom. The large kind of triangular blob area, that represents great-grandfather George. And in 1919, when he was 8 years old, he was allowed to traverse that entire area. He could walk by himself nearly 6 miles to go to the local fishing holes by himself at age 8. George had a son, Jack. Jack's kind of highlighted in the yellow circle. Jack, in 1950, was allowed to walk 1 mile by himself at age 8 to go to the woods and play. Now, George had a daughter, Vicki. She's represented by the yellow circle at the top. And Vicki, in 1979, when she was 8 years old, she was allowed to walk a half a mile down the road to go to the local swimming pool. And today, Vicki has a son, Ed. Ed's 8 years old today. And Ed is allowed to walk to the end of the street. But don't cross the road. You see, Ed's growing up like many children are today, completely disconnected from their sense of place, from the fabric of the community that they live in. And if a child is growing up disconnected from the environment that's around them, they are not getting the opportunity to really become part of the community, part of that next level of leaders. They're not investing into the society they live in. And instead, we tend to have children growing up that are more connected into fantasy worlds that are given to us and manipulated by us in an electronic fashion. So children aren't roaming. But the other problem we have is that children don't play like they used to either. Since the 1970s, children have lost over 9 hours a week of unstructured playtime. That's more than an hour a day removed from their lives that they're not allowed to play freely. And instead, we've replaced that with this idea of structured play. Structured play has a really hard beginning and an end time to it. It tends to be stressful. It tends to cause competitive attitude in nature. It can even be anxiety-laden. It's things like athletics, dance, music, maybe scouts or some other activity. Now, I'm an athlete. I played college sports. I played in high school. And I'm a big fan of extracurricular activities. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But when our children's lives are programmed in a way that they get up in the morning, they eat breakfast, they get on a bus, they go to school, school gets out, the child is then taken to piano lessons, then to soccer, maybe to youth group after that, comes home, eats, and goes to bed, and gets up and starts a schedule like that all over again. Is that what's best for our kids? When their lives are so programmed, maybe us as parents like that. Maybe our education system likes that. Maybe the world around us kind of wants it that way because then we're controlling things. And believe me, we love to control stuff as human beings. But when a child is removed its ability to play and removed their ability to roam, and we keep them under a virtual house arrest, again, is that really good for our kids? See, I would suggest that unstructured play needs to be much more prevalent in their lives. Because unstructured play is this free play. It has no rules, there's no parameters. But when you do this unstructured play, kids' imaginations grow. Their problem-solving skills, their social skills, their creativity blossoms. Research indicates that by the time a child is 3 years old, if they're not having at least an hour a day of unstructured playtime, their brains will not develop appropriately. Unstructured play looks like this. It's kids playing outdoors, stacking blocks, playing in a sandbox, building a fort, climbing a tree, riding their bike. Unstructured play does not have the parent hovering over them, and there's no schedule or plan for how it works. It's driven by the imagination. Unstructured play has got motor building skills where kids are moving, jumping, climbing, maybe learning to take risks. I'd rather my child learn to take risks now at age 5, 6, 7, or 8 instead of at age 16 when you hand them a set of car keys. The Outdoor Discovery Center where I work has taken a real effort into trying to redefine how play spaces are designed. The pictures that you see on the screen right now are of natural playscapes that we've put in at the Outdoor Discovery Center. These are features of sandboxes and logs and stumps and rocks. There's trees that the kids can climb, piles of sticks that they can use to build forts, where their brains can work freely and imaginatively. And we purposely in these environments put seating only out in one area up on the top of a hill overlooking it, so the parents can't just necessarily hover over their children and control their functions. Because again, a child needs to understand the environment around them for themselves. Needs to be able to ask questions and come up with those answers to those questions. And then we talk about this electronic world too, that kind of goes hand in hand with all this. This is one of the best cartoons I've seen that summarizes this issue. It shows these two kids watching TV. The parent sticks the head in and says, "Hey, why don't you go outside and play? It's a beautiful day instead of sitting in here watching cartoons." And the kids pick up the remote and click. The Grand Canyon is a steep-sided gorge carved by the Colorado River. You see, our children are actually going and being driven to, and even kind of directed to, learn from the electronic world around them. Now, I love electronics. Got a lot of it of my own. But everything is good in moderation, right? And if our children can unplug that electronic umbilica and actually step outside of the screen world and have a hands-on experience of their own, isn't that what's best for our children? I'd argue that this is not. You see, nature has great benefits for kids, adults as well. Nature is an important aspect of our lives. For all of human history, people have grown up interacting with the environment, whether it's through farming, whether it was through hunting, fishing, gathering, building their own homes, settling land. In just the last few decades, we've seemingly removed that from our children's lives, simplified things, turned the electronic world into the key factor, and started to remove the environment. So much so that if you traverse around this community tonight, and as you drive home from here and you drive by a park, look at the park and tell me what you see. Because when I drive around, not all, but a majority of them, including school playgrounds, including church playgrounds, have bare landscapes. They've stripped the earth away. If you're lucky, you have wood chips underneath the playground equipment. You might have rubber, even asphalt. There's probably no trees and no grass. We'll fence it in, and then the community industry, the business leaders will say, we need creative children. And the schools will say, we're developing creative children. And the college institutions will say, we're developing tomorrow's leaders, creative problem solvers. But the environment we put them in is about as stark and plain as you can get. And because we can build an $80,000 plastic play structure that looks like a boat, does not mean you're inspiring a child's imagination. You see, nature makes kids more creative and imaginative. When was the last time you saw a kid riding a bike down the street with a baseball card fastened in their spokes, pretending they were Luke Skywalker in The Last Frontier? When was the last time you saw a group of kids doing that and you thought it was a gang of kids? It doesn't happen that often anymore because our children don't roam. They don't get to explore the environment around them. They don't get to be as creative. Is it because of the way we built our communities? Maybe. Too many major highways, byways, major intersections that keep communities from moving? Are our subdivisions sprawled out too much? Maybe. Is it stranger danger? Are we have fear of our child getting abducted? I'm a parent. My kid's well-being is primary to me. But I'm not willing to risk my child's health out of fear that someone might take them. Because you know what? Statistically, childhood abductions have decreased every year for the last 40 years. What has improved? Media. Well, make sure you hear about it on your phone, your pad, tablet, wherever. Think about that. We even have evidence that children get better test scores. Children are smarter when they're out in nature. There's a group of students that were monitored in New York. The same demographic of student. They took half of them and put them in a nature-based program, half of them and left them in a non-nature-based program. The kids in the nature-based program, and I'm going to define nature for you, it's grass and trees. I'm not talking about a national park. Grass and trees. Kids that had views of that out their window or interacted with it on a regular basis, 27% higher achievement scores than the group of children that did not. Research has proven that nature is good. It increases our cognitive abilities. We learn better. Our brains develop better. It makes us healthier. If you're active in the outdoors, you're going to sleep better. Research says you're going to eat better. Goes for adults too. Study done in Japan said that a group of people that were on Prozac, when they just took them off medication and had them walk 30 minutes a day in nature, their symptoms went away and they never took medication again. Isn't that the world we should be living in? If you want to learn more about these kind of statistics and see what you can really dive into, go to the Children in Nature Network's website at childreninnature.org. Volumes and volumes of research produced by some of the top PhDs and MDs in the world have been collected in that one website. And you can learn a lot more about this there. You see, I think every child in America, including my own children, should be outside every day. I think every parent in America should have the problem that my wife and I have had raising our 3 kids. And that's that we have to frisk them down to remove the frogs and toads from their pockets before they enter the house. Because it's only then that the child is actually being fully creative. You see, I want children to see the world through the lens of a magnifying glass rather than the screen on an iPad. Because it's then that they're actually questioning the world they live in and developing answers to that so they better understand it and can be a better future leader for our community. I think children need to get dirty, and we got to stop worrying about the fact that they get dirty. Is it really that bad that your children have grass stains on their knees? I kind of look at it as a badge of honor when my kids are dirty, and I'm fine with it. And I think our kids need to take risks and they need to get wet. And it needs to be okay that they get dirty and they get wet, because that's good for them. That develops their brain, and that makes them just that much closer to being a successful adult. And I think parents need to take an active role in this as well. Because you see, a child is not afraid to go outside. A child is not afraid of a snake, a frog, a cricket, a grasshopper, or whatever animal you want to put out there. It's typically the adults that are with them that cause that fear to start. It's typically the adults that dictate whether or not they should or should not be outdoors. So adults need to take a vested interest in their children and get them connected to the environment that they live in for their health and their well-being. If families spend time in nature, children will benefit from it. So as I end here, I'm going to ask you this question. When you leave here tonight, how are you going to help create that ripple effect to get children outdoors? Maybe it's your child, maybe it's a neighbor, a niece, a nephew, but I want you to think about what child are you going to impact by reconnecting them with nature. Thank you.